Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to another episode of the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you enjoy what you're listening to, if you could subscribe, then you will get the episode every Tuesday and Thursday that they come out. You can also rate us. That helps us spread the word of the Advancement Podcast. If you're watching, you can like us on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube, and you will get everything on Tuesday and Thursday as well on those platforms. My name is Todd Barham. I am the host of the Advancement Podcast here with the lead consultant of Advancement, Tim Ware. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well today.
Yeah, hey, good. I want to give a listener shout out. I talked to a listener this week, and it's Chris Snow. You know Chris Snow.
I know Chris.
He said he enjoys the podcast. He says we are his second favorite podcast. He says when he gets bored with Dave Ramsey, he flips over to the Advancement Podcast. So thanks, Chris, for letting us be your second favorite podcasts out there. Hey, but if we're behind Dave Ramsey, I guess that's not too bad. Right?
Well, you talk about totally different content too.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't want to do an episode today on money.
No.
I mean, one day we probably will do a money or two episode.
Yeah, we will, but I think that's. I guess that could be in our wheelhouse somewhere because we talk about healthy leaders and teams and change.
Yeah.
It can slide in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to fund the dream somehow.
You got to fund that baby. It needs money.
Yeah.
Money, honey.
Yeah. Now he would not like our no debt equals no vision. He would not like that at all.
No. Yeah. I think there are some philosophical things that we would say that are different, but he's looking at from one perspective, and his stuff is phenomenal. Some of the things he's teaching are just incredible, especially around personal finances more than organizational, which is his strength.
Yeah.
But we love Dave Ramsey.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Chris, for listening. We appreciate you. And so last episode we talked about change.
We launched into this idea of change.
Yeah. And we meant to get to 7 points, and we got to 0 of them.
Well, we're gonna get. The reality is, it's like everything else. You got to lay a foundation.
Sure.
And you open the episode saying that there are people in our churches who say, "Well, God doesn't change. The Word of God doesn't change. So why should we change?"
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry I messed up the flow.
But that's not wrong because change is about their attitude matters everything.
Oh yeah.
I mean, why is it that New Year's resolutions don't make it 6 weeks most of the time?
Because we don't want to change.
Because change, we love the idea of change.
Yeah.
We don't like the work.
Yeah, the work is hard.
Of change.
Getting up by the third morning of getting up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym, it gets a lot harder.
That's really something that we didn't say last time. And I think it's one of the reasons that our churches often don't change is because it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it does.
Change.
A lot of meetings.
Work.
A lot of meetings. A lot of investing in people. A lot of stuff.
Change is hard work. Going to the gym to get slim, going to the gym to muscle up, getting your heart rate up. All right. So I'm a kidney donor.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that, but I'm a kidney donor. And we're coming up on 18 months since I donated my kidney, and I had at my 1 year labs, which I did late because of COVID and things.
Yeah.
The science is your kidneys process your protein.
Okay.
And the older you get, part of the reason they tell you to reduce your red meat content, some of those things as you get older, is because your kidneys are not as flexible. They don't work quite as well.
Yeah.
And now that I have one,
Yeah, and you're advanced in age.
I am not advanced in age. I can't. We're going to have Susie Macaluso back on with us, and we're going to talk about some age ministry. And I'm going to have her beat on you.
That is one thing
calling me old.
That is one thing that Chris said. He called me an ageist. He said, I need to be nice to Tim. I said, Chris, Tim will be okay.
That's right, you young punk. Anyway, so my kidney, I have to watch what is your creatinine number.
Yeah.
And so anytime they do blood tests, they're looking at my creatinine because this is a reflection of how my kidney's processing protein.
Because that can jack with your blood.
Yeah, and it can wear my kidney out faster. Yeah. There's a lot of things that happen there. So my son made fun of me this weekend. I knew we were. I was.
Your son made fun of you.
I was barbecuing, right?
Yeah.
So barbecue is all about. It's all about the meat,
protein.
The meat. That's right. It's all about the protein. So I said, I got to eat a salad. I had a salad with no meat in it for lunch. That's just. I was raised meat. It's not a meal if it doesn't have meat.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But I'm having to change. I mean, I grew up eating eggs. I don't eat eggs very often for breakfast in the morning. I basically do grain stuff almost, because I'm trying to make a shift so that when I eat protein, I can eat I can eat protein.
Eat as much protein as you want.
So and this is hard. Change is hard. It goes against everything from your past.
Yeah.
To change for a preferred or a different future. And I think that one of the reasons that change doesn't happen in church is because it's hard, number one.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that we run into is we run into fear. Well, will the church, as pastors, will the church people leave? Will the givers stop giving?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's tough.
We start asking all of those questions, and it becomes difficult to lead change.
Yeah.
It becomes difficult. I think they say that we will tolerate however much pain we can tolerate is going to set our limits for how much change there is in our life.
Yeah.
And I think that in my life, I'll speak for me, that when my personal transformation pushed me to a place where I couldn't stand it anymore, then I usually either led change, forced change, or left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And only one of those is really the right way to do it. But it's also because we didn't create a culture of change, which is really what you were alluding to, that I told you that I would say that a culture of change includes 7 elements.
Yeah. So why don't we get into those 7 elements? Because I know that we'll talk a little bit on each of them, but I think it's interesting for our listeners, and many of them out there are probably saying, give me some pieces to help me change. So when we walk through these 7 elements, they're probably going to find pieces that they need to change even as you're talking.
So the number one thing is that and to have a culture of change, you need to have vision.
Okay.
We did a couple episodes on vision a few weeks back, and
stop and go listen if you need to.
That's right. And the reason that vision becomes important in a culture of change is because you can't, when you're a leader, you can't just change for the sake of change.
Right. You got to have a direction.
Why?
And a reason.
Because people are going to ask, why are we changing this? Why are we changing our music style? Why are we changing the color? Why are we changing I had a pastor recently dealing with a congregation, and someone said, are y'all going to paint it black, paint the room black? And and they said, because black is evil.
Yeah, it's demonic.
Demonic. I'm like, what? That's stupid. Anyway, so the point being that you have to be able to answer the why question, and vision gives you a broader piece to say we make this change because we're going there.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes vision brings it totally into picture for everybody. Like recently, well, this wasn't recently, this is a while back, we transferred from pews to chairs in the sanctuary.
That was quite a while back.
It was quite a while back. And a lady in my church at the time, she was an older lady, and she came to me and she was very excited. I love pews. Pews, you don't have church without pews. And instead of talking down to her, I just said, I don't have a problem with pews. The problem I do have with pews is I can't move them for any reason. I said, so we're getting rid of the pews so that our room is flexible to do anything. I said, so like when your grandchildren come to Vacation Bible School, I can move the pews and they can have an open space.
Move the chairs.
I can move the chairs. I said, but with pews, I can't move them. And instantly she was taken off guard of, now I'm never going to convince her that pews are not holy. I'm not going to convince her that. But when I sold her on the idea of this makes the space flexible so that we can continue to minister even to your family more effectively, it kind of took her off the offense and eased her fears a little bit.
Well, that's a great example that vision has to be relatable to everybody there. Right. I had a pastor one time, he said that he was facing this resistance to change about doing something in the church, and he said, what do I do with this person that's just berating me? And I said, so just ask them which of their grandchildren are they willing to let go to hell?
Yeah,
because this change is about about children.
Yeah.
And that person said, well, none of them. He said, so who else's grandchildren are you willing to let go to hell?
Yeah.
So, from he was an evangelical pastor, and that question really poked in there.
Well,
so
we have to put it in their wheelhouse. Otherwise, they don't understand why they need to change. If we don't help them see how it applies to them, then they're not going to see the need to change.
So you have this overarching vision, because that becomes that guiding point for what we're making the change, because this is where we're going, because this is what God's asked us to do. And if the vision is harvest centric, if the vision always includes not just growth, but reaching people, reaching unchurched, reaching those who do not follow Jesus, then that's another thing that's the eternal vision. If we can tie the changes to shifting eternity for somebody's life, it really makes it harder for someone to argue. If we're just doing it so we can grow, mm-hmm. But if we're doing it because the vision is to shift eternity in someone's life, man, then that right there, it makes it harder for people to push back on. They'll stumble around and they'll get mad, and then people will. I mean,
yeah.
It's sad, but the truth is our change needs to be tied to an eternal concept,
right,
and to the vision of moving people toward heaven.
Yeah.
Because then if we can tie it there clearly, then it's anchored in Jesus. It's not anchored in me. What it's done is it's taken it away from. It's helped me not be as selfish,
right,
as a leader, and saying, well, this is what I want, but this is what it takes to reach people.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one, you need to have a clear vision that's tied to eternity in a culture of change. That's a critical piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number two.
Second thing I would say is that, and it's kind of a kissing cousin vision.
Okay.
But
kissing cousin.
Sorry. Does that term not work for you?
It works. It's just
it's intentionality.
Okay.
And the reason I say that I use that, I'd say it's connected, because and we talked about in our vision, those episodes on vision, how that people went for years, and in the 90s and early 2000s, we got to get a church vision. That'll change everything. I actually know a church consultant. He says if a church can get vision, then everything will be fixed. But you know what? A lot of people have vision, but if there's no implementation,
it's got to be practical.
There has to. Well, it's not just about being practical. You actually have to do something once you got the vision.
Well, that's the biggest thing I work with the staff, or the staff at my church, is we, you know, we set these goals, but I'm like, okay, but what are the practical steps? I mean, this is a great goal, but how do you get there? And I think we miss the how to get there piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about intentionality. Says that we've got a vision. Now we're going to be intentional about doing it.
Yeah.
So if if you are in the inner city and there's trafficking and you feel like that's part of what God's asking you to do, and you're going to make changes to engage in trafficking and in breaking up human trafficking in the area,
Yeah.
then you have to do certain steps. You have to take steps. And if you're in a suburban area or a metropolitan, whatever the harvest is that you're reaching into, there has to be intentionality. So change requires intentionality. That's the key.
Yeah.
And change is not random.
Yeah.
Now, this is one of the things that
well, some changes will happen if you're not intentional about the right changes happening.
That's correct. Yeah.
Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
Do you feel like your church is stuck in a rut? Then we've got the answer for you here at Advancement. Do you need some personal coaching or maybe some leadership coaching? We can help you out. Contact the Advancement team at info@advancement.cc or check out the website at advancement.cc.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
2020, COVID forced change.
Yeah.
And that makes it that's more difficult. When
it makes it harder.
It is. But when you think about intentionality and change, that if we're intentionally making these moves, if we've decided, okay, that's what we have to do, so we're going to go there. Here, going back to my kidney illustration, I have to, whether I like it or not, choose to eat a salad. Choose to not eat, to reduce my, I don't get to eat a steak the size of my whole hand anymore. They tell me I only get to eat one the palm size. So I'm limited to, I'm supposed to eat 8 ounce, maybe a 10 ounce. No 12, no 14 ounce steaks anymore.
Yeah.
That hurts a brother.
Yeah.
But it's still an intentional choice, because if I don't, then I reap the consequences the other way.
Yeah.
So intentionality.
Yeah. So that's good. So vision,
intentionality,
intentionality,
number 2,
and number 3.
And then I would say there needs to be innovation.
Innovation.
And here's what I mean by that. When we do change as leaders in churches, we go to conferences and somebody says, well, this is, we read books and this is what I did. And then we often copycat.
Yeah.
We become copycats. And people say, well, that's just what they're doing over there. Or we're just going to, Pastor, or some people in our church say, well, we just need to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
The host of the partner here where the studio is, I was told, we were having a conversation this past week, and he talked about someone in his church saying, online, and that this church, this person was comparing the online
presence
of another church to the online presence of this church, and kind of saying, well, we need to do what they're doing, not what we're doing.
Right.
Now, wait a minute. I mean, okay, first of all, there are lots of lessons. We need to learn from everybody out there.
Right.
But the innovative part is we need to be individual and do what God's asking us to do.
Yeah.
And so COVID forced change. And there were some people that innovated in the moment. They took the forced change and they formed it and they shaped it, and they did what they had to make it their own.
Right.
So that it fit who they were as a church and fit the mission that they were on. And then there were others who just said, well, this is what everybody else is doing, and just started going, do.
Yeah.
The truth is, I would say that 90% or more of the online presence pre-COVID was not innovative
Right.
change. It was just copycat change.
Yeah. And a lot of it was rushed too.
Yeah. Now, during COVID, it was rushed.
Yeah.
But I'm talking pre-COVID.
Yeah.
It was just something. It was the cool, dare I say, it was the cool thing everybody was doing. It was easy, so we could do it too.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily intentional or innovative for that church. Now, so we need to have innovation is it exists in our churches. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Let's just be honest. Most pastors are not natural innovators.
Right. Most.
Most are not. It's not. But in your church, there's people who think innovative. There's an entrepreneur. There's an outside the box thinker, and we have to draw in moments of change. We need to draw those creative people, those outside the box thinkers, close and say, "What could this be?"
Well, and I think what we have to understand is a part of what it means to be a leader is not always having all the good ideas, but sometimes it's putting the right people on the team that have the good ideas and just leading that.
Leadership, the way we define leadership here at Advancement, the key word, the primary verb in that definition is facilitate.
Right.
So I have to facilitate what's going on. So that's exactly what you're saying. We need to be able to facilitate.
Just get the right people in the room.
Right.
And let the magic happen.
Let the magic happen.
Yeah.
So we have to be innovative. I want to be real careful. It's not that there aren't things we learn from other people, and in some cases, why recreate the wheel?
Right.
But we don't need to.
But we can put our spin on it. Doesn't have to be exactly the way somebody else does it.
And it's easy to just go copy somebody. I think you gather multiple things, and then you sit back and say, okay, I've learned this. Do I do what any of these guys do? Do we take combinations, or do we step back and say none of that feels like it's right for us? So when you're doing innovation, this is a place to, for one of the practical pieces in this is you've got to create a space for testing.
Yeah.
You've got to create a laboratory environment where we test things. Historically, and some of our churches, pastors would, you take the pulpit and you go, God said, so we're going to do. We play the God card.
Yeah.
That God's tied to a method instead of to a move. When the best thing for us to do is tell people, hey, we're going to try this. And it's okay to try 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things. And then you go, oh, this works.
Yeah.
This is the one. You'll know it when you hit that groove.
Right.
And that's the way innovation works. Innovation is not a rubber stamp or a one-time thing. It's a place where you test and try and experiment to discover.
Yeah.
So we got to be willing to do that.
So you want to do one more? Or?
Yeah, I think we got time for
one more. Okay.
All right. Number 4. This is a good one to end on.
Okay.
Because it's probably the most overlooked piece in change.
Okay.
And it's the fact that we need to, here it is. If number 1 is we need strong vision, number 2 is we need to have be intentionality in the culture. Number 3 piece of the culture is innovation. This 4th one is we have to have space for grief.
Okay.
All change carries a certain amount of grief. For some reason, you're a Cowboys fan. I still haven't understood why.
Well, I was born in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so that might have something to do with it.
I remember when...
But you're a Texans fan, so...
Yeah, that's true. If I'm anybody's fan nowadays. But
okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But when sports, every time there's the coaching change, when Tom Landry, there was grief around the fans.
There's still grief about Tom
There's
Landry.
Still grief. And he's not even alive anymore.
I mean, you start talking to my dad about Tom Landry, and he gets all fired up. The way Jerry Jones did Tom Landry was awful. Like, Dad, that was almost before I was born.
Yeah, I know. But with coaching changes, with players retiring, right now, if the NFL comes back in the fall,
It will. Speak life.
then Tom Brady will be a Buccaneer.
It's going to be so weird.
How much grief is there in Boston right now?
Hey, they got Cam Newton. Woo!
That's not quite the same.
No, it's not.
But, I mean, you see that any change, there's a certain amount of grief because we've been comfortable with what we've had. Even if we didn't always like it,
Yeah.
we were at least comfortable with it. And comfort's a big deal. And so there's always a level of grief. Some people will grieve more. Some people will grieve less.
Yeah.
And grief, the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief that's out there. Now, some people, there's psychologists debate it today, but because it was written, Kubler-Ross, they put this thing out in the 1960s.
Yeah.
But the 5 stages that there's first, denial, then there's anger, then there's bargaining, then there's depression, and then there's acceptance.
Yeah.
Now, depending on what you read, those 5 things may not always be sequential. Different people respond different ways, and they can overlap because something can happen and it throws me right back. It brings it back up. If you've ever lost a parent, or you've lost a sibling, or you've lost a loved one, when you understand the grief in that, there's grief around change.
Yeah.
Whether it be a staff member leaving of their own choice or your choice as a leader. Yeah. It can be over, music. It can be over a Sunday school class or a teacher, or, I know people in my life that have grieved over the shift from the King James to a NIV or ESV.
They're still grieving about it.
I mean, it's just, but so grief can show up, and here's it's a reality. It is a reality, and we need to, the deal that happens is leaders, before they introduce it, they've already gone through the grief process.
Yeah.
So they're ready. They're ready to run, and we have to make space for grief.
Gotcha.
We have to, and I think you can identify certain people who are going to grieve this thing, and so we need to give them space. We need to create a moment. This is create a moment. There was a pastor they built a new building, and there were people who were really tied to their old building. And he did something that was it was stellar, because what he did was they did a transition service. And they met at the old building, and they had a very special moment, and it was a solemn moment. Mm-hmm. And then they went outside and they stood in the parking lot together, and there was this prayer moment, and they symbolically locked the doors on the building. Then they all collectively caravanned to the new facility, and then there was a prayer moment, and they opened the doors and they went in to celebrate. He created this grieving space. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't always do it, but I think that what we often overlook in our exuberance to see the new as leaders is we don't allow people the opportunity to grieve.
Yeah.
Or we diminish their grief with our attitude or something. Mm-hmm. Is that too heavy?
No, it's good.
Okay.
It's good.
All right. So takeaways. We'll finish. So that's 4 of the 7. 4 first ones we covered today were vision, intentionality, innovation, and space. These are the 7 elements of a culture of change.
Yeah, we'll do the last 3 in the next episode. But yeah. I'd say the thing that got me the most is the eternal peace is what drives home the change in people's hearts. that we have to keep people focused on the eternal piece. And I feel like we say that ad nauseum here on the Advancement Podcast, but we're hoping that eventually we'll get it, that eternality and the kingdom of God is what should drive everything that we do. And if it doesn't, then it's selfishly motivated.
Well, what do they teach you in your leadership classes? That about the time that you're tired of saying it, everybody else has just begun to get it.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Appreciate it.
All right. So we'll see y'all.
See you next time on the Advancement Podcast.
Woohoo.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.